In this video, you'll hear soothing reflections to help you cope with anxiety, set against peaceful music and relaxing landscapes. If you just want to unwind, skip to the final chapter. What if I told you that your anxiety isn't your enemy, but actually your unconscious mind desperately trying to save you from yourself? Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist who revolutionized our understanding of the human psyche, discovered something that most therapists today completely ignore. He found that anxiety isn't just random brain chemistry gone wrong. It's actually an urgent message from the deepest, most hidden part of your personality. This forgotten part of yourself, what Jung called the shadow, has been trying to communicate with you through every anxious moment, every panic attack, every sleepless night. But here's the shocking truth. We've been taught to silence this voice instead of listening to what it's desperately trying to tell us. Picture this. You're lying in bed at 3 a.m., your heart racing for no apparent reason. Your mind is spinning with worries about tomorrow's meeting, next month's bills, or that conversation you had 3 years ago. You feel completely alone in this overwhelming spiral of thoughts, convinced that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But here's what Jung discovered through decades of working with patients. This exact experience connects you to millions of people throughout history. From ancient philosophers to modern CEOs, from artists to scientists, every human being has faced this same internal battle. Your anxiety isn't a personal failure or a sign of weakness. It's actually proof that you're human, and more importantly, that your psyche is working exactly as it should. Jung spent over 40 years studying the human mind and made a revolutionary discovery. We all have a shadow, the collection of thoughts, desires, and impulses that we've rejected or hidden from ourselves. This isn't some mystical concept. It's the psychological reality of every repressed emotion, every denied aspect of your personality, every part of yourself you've learned to be ashamed of. When you experience anxiety, your shadow is essentially knocking on the door of your consciousness, trying to bring your attention to something you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a career path you abandoned because others told you it wasn't practical. Perhaps it's anger you've never allowed yourself to feel, or dreams you've buried under layers of social expectations. The problem is that most people treat anxiety like an unwanted visitor. They try to medicate it away, distract themselves from it, or simply endure it until it passes. But Jung discovered that anxiety intensifies when we ignore these shadow messages. It's like having a fire alarm going off and choosing to remove the batteries instead of checking for the fire. What makes this even more fascinating is that Jung found a direct correlation between the intensity of someone's anxiety and the importance of the message their shadow was trying to deliver. The more desperately your unconscious mind needs you to pay attention to something, the louder and more persistent your anxiety becomes. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just another therapist with theories. He was the founder of analytical psychology and one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. His work on the collective unconscious and psychological archetypes fundamentally changed how we understand human behavior. When Jung spoke about the shadow, he was drawing from thousands of hours of clinical observation and his own profound personal journey into the depths of his psyche. Jung's approach differed radically from his mentor Freud because he saw the unconscious not as a repository of repressed sexual desires, but as a creative, intelligent force constantly working toward psychological wholeness. He called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating all aspects of yourself, including the parts you'd rather deny. According to Jung, anxiety emerges when this natural process of integration is blocked or ignored. Modern neuroscience has actually validated many of Jung's insights about the unconscious mind. Research shows that our brains process thousands of pieces of information below the threshold of consciousness. And emotional responses like anxiety often emerge from this unconscious processing. What Jung called shadow work aligns remarkably well with contemporary understanding of how suppressed emotions and unprocessed experiences create psychological distress. Jung's patient records reveal case after case of people whose anxiety disappeared not through suppression or medication, but through honest confrontation with their shadow material. He documented how individuals who learned to dialogue with their anxiety, treating it as valuable information rather than a pathological symptom, experienced profound psychological healing and personal transformation that lasted for decades. But here's where Jung's discovery gets truly mind-bending. He found that the specific type of anxiety you experience reveals exactly which part of your shadow is trying to communicate with you. Social anxiety? Your shadow might be pointing to authentic aspects of your personality that you've been hiding to fit in. Performance anxiety? There could be creative or ambitious parts of yourself that you've been suppressing out of fear of failure or judgment. Jung documented something even more intriguing. He noticed that people's anxiety often intensified right before major life breakthroughs. It was as if the shadow knew that a significant transformation was approaching and was desperately trying to prepare the conscious mind for what was coming. Patients would report weeks of inexplicable anxiety, only to have a life-changing realization or opportunity appear shortly after. The most fascinating part of Jung's research was his discovery of what he called anxiety dreams. These weren't nightmares in the traditional sense, but symbolic dreams that occurred during periods of high anxiety. When patients learned to interpret these dreams as messages from their shadow, they often found precise guidance for resolving their psychological conflicts. The anxiety would literally dissolve once the shadow's message was understood and integrated. Perhaps the most shocking revelation from Jung's work is this. The people who experienced the most severe anxiety often had the greatest potential for psychological growth and creative expression. Their shadow wasn't trying to torment them. It was trying to unlock abilities and aspects of themselves that had been dormant for years, sometimes decades. The intensity of their anxiety was proportional to the magnitude of their untapped potential. When you begin to understand anxiety as communication from your shadow, everything changes. Instead of feeling like a victim of your own mind, you suddenly become an active participant in a profound psychological dialogue. This shift in perspective alone has been shown to reduce anxiety symptoms by up to 60% in Jung's documented cases, simply because people stop fighting against themselves and start listening to what their psyche is trying to tell them. The psychological impact goes even deeper than symptom relief. Jung observed that people who learned to work with their shadow through anxiety developed what he called psychological resilience, an unshakable inner strength that came from knowing and accepting all parts of themselves. They stopped being afraid of their own emotions, thoughts, and impulses because they understood these as natural expressions of their complete humanity. Perhaps the most transformative psychological effect Jung documented was the development of authentic self-confidence. When people integrated their shadow material, the parts of themselves they had been rejecting, they no longer needed external validation to feel worthy. Their anxiety had been partially fueled by the exhausting effort of maintaining a false persona, and once they embraced their authentic selves, this energy was freed up for creative and productive purposes. The long-term psychological impact is profound. Jung's patients who successfully worked with their shadow through anxiety reported feeling more alive, more creative, and more connected to their true purpose than ever before. They described it as finally becoming whole, no longer split between who they thought they should be and who they actually were. This integration created a psychological foundation so solid that future challenges, while still difficult, no longer triggered the same overwhelming anxiety responses. Your anxiety isn't a malfunction. It's your shadow trying to guide you toward psychological wholeness. Every racing heartbeat, every sleepless night, every moment of overwhelming worry is actually your unconscious mind's attempt to bring rejected parts of yourself back into the light. Jung's revolutionary insight shows us that the path through anxiety isn't around it or over it, but directly through it with curiosity and courage rather than resistance and fear. The next time anxiety visits you, remember Jung's forgotten lesson. Pause and ask yourself what your shadow might be trying to tell you. What aspect of your authentic self have you been hiding? What dreams have you abandoned? What emotions have you been afraid to feel? Your anxiety holds the key to these answers and, more importantly, to the psychological freedom that comes from embracing your complete, unedited humanity. This isn't just about managing symptoms, it's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that you've lost along the way. Jung proved that anxiety can be transformed from your greatest enemy into your most trusted guide, leading you not just to relief, but to a life of authentic self-expression and unshakable inner peace. The question isn't whether you'll listen to your shadow's message, but whether you'll have the courage to act on what it reveals.